Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast. We are your hosts, Kristin and Karan. On this podcast, we are highlighting ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble.
Today we're talking with our very own Kristin Joy Davis. Kristin is an educator and a language story coach and author. She has been working in the education field since 2005 as a teacher, tutor, and director. She is the founder of Language Ninjas and the co-founder of the very own Pirate Living podcast, as well as her new podcast, The Purposeful Parent. She has just published her third book, My Words Are My Wand. And if you haven't grabbed your copy yet, please do it now. Hit pause, go buy it, and then come back.
Mm-hmm.
So Kristin, we get to talk and highlight really cool pirates every week. And I'm excited to turn the tables here and dive into your pirate journey. So why don't you tell us so we can learn how you got to where you are here today?
That can be a story. Trying to think where to start, because I've been learning how to do this briefly and also longer too. So, everything ties together. So let's start with briefly at the very beginning. When I was in kindergarten, going way back, I was paid to talk. And I did not talk in kindergarten unless I was made to. And I remember, so my mom told me that my kindergarten teacher wanted me to go to special education. And she was like, no, she talks a lot at home. She's fine. Doesn't need that. So instead I went to a child psychologist, and the idea of how to get me to talk was bribe me. Mm-hmm. So with the bribing for my kindergarten teacher was, and every time that I talked to her, I was supposed to get a penny in a jar. And at the end of the school year, however many pennies I had, we were supposed to go shopping with them. And I remember a couple of things. First, I remember raising my hand and just being like, I don't want to talk to her, but I have to because I'm getting paid. Like, I'm getting bribed for this. And the other thing is, we never went shopping. And this is in the 80s, like late 80s, but still, this is in the 80s. Like, even if I only talked 5 times, we could have gone and gotten a piece of candy. There would have been something we could have gotten. So there's no way I only talked like 4 times or less.
So did you get to keep the penny, or so did she keep?
No, she had them. I never saw them.
That's bullshit.
It is. Because, I mean, like I said, the 80s, you could have gotten something in the 80s for 5 cents.
Absolutely. Hubba bubba.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even if I only talked 5 times within that time, I could have done something. So, yeah. So anyway, during school, for a while, I was bribed, if I'd get stickers and those stickers would lead up to something, I would be praised by teachers if I talked. I remember boys coming up to me, tapping me on the shoulder and going, "Hey, Kristin." I'd be like, "What?" All annoyed. "What? Why are you talking?" And then they'd run away and be like, "She talked." So yeah, that was most of my school life. Like in high school, I was very selective with who I talked to, hung out with. And it wasn't until college that I finally felt like I could free myself and open up from that shell that I'd been in. And I was just like, woohoo, people my own age, I can socialize. But yeah, so it took me a long time to really start figuring out who I was and what I wanted. But part of that was I went to college for elementary education. And along the way, so most people going into elementary education, like when they went into college, when they came out, they could pretty easily get a job. When I came out, there was this really weird boom of like not enough openings, too many teachers, not enough openings. And so I kept applying for jobs. I was substitute teaching and I kept getting like, sorry, you don't have experience. Like, what do you mean I don't have experience? How is substitute teaching not experience? So I went for years, like between substitute teaching and then tutoring, which I really enjoyed the tutoring because I was getting to teach, but doing it in a smaller group setting. So I got to know the kids. Where substitute teaching, even though it could be fun for a day, like it was also stressful because you're jumping into somebody else's classroom with a bunch of kids you don't know, and they're like, "Woo, somebody new." So I found
I don't remember treating my substitute teachers super well.
No, even if you like them, you're still like, woohoo, somebody that doesn't know us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'd lose my voice often too, because I'd have to be yelling. Oh, that's something I forgot about, like with voice. When I was in college, like doing my student teaching, the person that was evaluating my student teaching, so not the teacher I was working directly with, but like my professor with it, she had pulled me aside one day and told me that maybe I should consider not teaching because my voice, because I wasn't loud. And I was just like, that's a load of crap, because I shouldn't have to be loud or yell in order to be an effective teacher. And so, yeah, that was one thing. With substitute teaching, it was a lot of like, I need to project my voice in order for you to hear me because everybody's excited that somebody new's here. So yeah, with the tutoring, it was quieter. It was one-on-one or three to one. And I got to know the kids a little bit more. And then once Lance and I moved out to Oregon, I started working in childcare. So that's where I really got to start learning things. Like while I was working in childcare, I got to finally teach my own class. But before I taught my own class, I had a couple years of being afloat and filling in for other people. And I remember it wasn't supposed to be something mean said about me, but I was like, one of the teachers was like, Kristin's too nice. I was like, what do you mean too nice? Like, that's like the kids aren't listening because she's too nice. And it's like, that shouldn't be an issue either. Like not being loud enough and being mean, or being loud and being mean shouldn't be qualifiers. And
that's not how I remember my favorite teachers.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
oh, they were loud and mean. They were so effective.
Yeah. So when I finally had my own group of kids that were my students, I had 2 kids in the class that didn't speak a lot. And I remember I had to do this assessment with each of the kids to figure out how many letters they knew of the alphabet. Did they know the sounds? Did they like just place them in what they knew? And the 2 that didn't really speak, they didn't want to tell me any answers. So I just leaned in to them, and both of them I'd known for a little while anyhow, because they'd been in the center for a few years. And so it's like, hey, I get it. You don't want to talk. Sometimes I'm going to need an answer from you that you can just shake your head, yes or no. Sometimes I'm going to need an answer, and you can whisper that answer to me, but I'm going to let you know, like, if I need you to actually give me words for the answer. So we built a rapport up that way. And honestly, by the end of the year, like they went off to, I saw them both for their kindergarten year too. And then they went off to public school for first grade. And both of them were like out of their shells so much from where they were that I was like, man, I wish I had that when I was younger, just that permission to talk or not talk. And so that was part of leading me into where I am today. And then the other thing was, I had this little boy in my class one year with autism, and he was one of my greatest teachers the whole entire time. And there were so many things that I got to experience with him, where even though there were some challenges and I felt stressed out a lot of days, I was learning a lot about how to use my words to say what I wanted. And for like, I was dealing with biting and hitting and running around the classroom, and he had an aide that came in, and I was talking to her about it. And she's like, think about this, like you're driving, driver's training, first time behind the car, you've got all these simulations going on, and your instructor yells, "Don't turn left." What are you going to do? And she just looked at me and I laughed. I was like, "I'm turning left because that's all I heard." And she's like, "Yeah, that's what he's hearing. He's just hearing the last part of that. He's not hearing the don't. He's hearing run. He's hearing hit. He's hearing bite." So you need to say things like what you want him to do. You need to say how you want it done, and you're going to be repeating it because he was low on the verbal scale too. So she's like, keep it simple, say it often, say what you want. So it became a game in a way too, where the biggest one was he liked to climb up the slide, and we weren't supposed to do that. So I'd have to say, go down the slide and up the stairs. And he'd check me. He'd like look over at me and be like, "Are you going to tell me? You're going to tell me?" Like down the slide, up the stairs. And I started to notice in my body as well, like if I was like, "No, don't climb up the slide," versus go down the slide, up the stairs. Like I felt it in my body. Like I was becoming aware enough of how I was talking. I was like, oh, like saying no, it's stressful. It's closing up in my chest, and saying go down the slide and up the stairs, I feel more relaxed. Like this is easier to repeat. So yeah. So over the next couple years of teaching, I was learning more about me and more about my words, and met Mr. Mark England, who we've interviewed, and learned about our words. And that led to me. I was still teaching at the time. I was like, I reached out to Mark. I was like, "Hey, have you thought about doing vocabulary for kids?" Because I was one of those teachers that would buy books based off of what I wanted to teach to the kids. And he's like, basically throughout our conversation, he's like, "Why don't you write a book? I'll write a forward for it." So that led me down the path of writing my first book, which was Abracadabra, I Know What to Do. And and then building Language Ninjas, which is creating tools for parents and teachers to use with kids to help them learn about their words and how simple little shifts in our words can change how we feel, and that we get to decide how we feel. And then we started, because we met and enlifted, and we started this amazing pirate podcast. And there was a point in time where I was like, I don't know how all these things fit together, but I'm doing it.
Somehow they work.
Yeah, they work.
Yeah.
And now I'm the ninja pirate. So
yeah.
Did I tell you that?
No.
I did an in-person event selling books, and they had me as one of the questions on the I wasn't told about this, but there was like a scavenger hunt, and if you filled it out, you got a prize, and people were supposed to look for the ninja pirate.
Amazing.
Only one person came up asking me about it, and I was like, I was so confused because I didn't know. But then after a while, it's like, oh yeah, I bet that's me.
Makes sense. You're the ninja pirate.
The ninja pirate.
There's worse things to be.
It's true.
Cool. You know what's hard about interviewing you? Is I know so much of your story already. Yeah.
How about you tell?
Well, what I'd like to talk, there's a few things I want to talk about. And we've kind of talked about some of this before, in terms of like your time with Anat Perry, who is our second guest, third.
I think she was in the 20s, but still, she was toward the beginning.
Okay. I think I'm confused. Yeah. Okay. And your time when training camp for the soul. But what I want to know is, why do you think you didn't want to talk?
That's a really great question. And there's a few things that come up with that. I was the third of 4 kids, is part of it. I had some competition, especially the older not younger brother, older brother. But I don't even know necessarily when it started, when I didn't talk, or if it's always been, or if it's been most of my life, not always. Because remember, my mom would tell me I was the happy baby. And in fact, that followed me for a lot of my life. Like, be the happy one, be the good one. Don't be like your siblings. And family, if you're listening to it, you're going to hear some things. So, and I love you. Yeah. So anyway, I remember hearing that like a lot of times too, like be the happy one. So I wondered if that has something to do with it, but also, there's a couple of things that I've wondered. Like first, I don't think I was planned. And so my mom my older brother had joked and my mom had joked a bit that my older brother was a handful. So they waited to have kids. But then also, there came out one point in time when I was older that my mom actually didn't plan to have more than 2 kids. And so I was a surprise. And then my mom's like, yep, but then I decided to have a 4th and even out the numbers. So at that time, I thought it was funny. I was like, so my younger brother can thank me for being alive.
Yeah. It's all because of you.
You're welcome.
You paved the way.
Yep. And so, with that though, like there was some stress. Like my parents, my mom shifted what she was doing for work, decided to work from home instead of for a company around the time that she was pregnant with me. My dad I think he also shifted a few years before that to working for himself versus working for somebody else. And then just not expecting to add another mouth to feed into the family. Like, I think there was some stress there that, because I didn't realize until way later, till about 3 years ago, that I had lived my life in anxiety. Like, I don't know a moment where I didn't have like some form of that going on. And so I wonder if it was some of that anxiety and like I was feeling anxious a lot. I also, like, if I knew people, I would talk with them. I'd open up if I was comfortable. And if I didn't know them, I wouldn't. So maybe I was also partially just very particular about who I talked to. And then that story of she's shy built up so much that became who I am. I'm Kristin. I'm shy. I don't talk. Yeah, because I had moments, at least at home, where I was open and talking to whoever, or the joke even into my adulthood was like, Kristin's quiet until you get to know her, and then you can't get her to shut up. So yeah, that's what I wonder, if it was a combination, but also that whole Kristin's shy.
Yeah.
And then it built up and it became the label, and it became part of my identity because it's what I had heard so much.
Yeah. I mean, I really resonate with that because I was always the shy kid, and like even to like coaching group classes, I mean, I remember before I started coaching at the gym, my coach, when I joined like the competition team and all of a sudden was around new people for the first like year, my coach was like, do you ever talk? Like, yeah. That's it. Yeah, I do. And yeah, it's you do get that label of oh no, she's the shy, quiet one. And so yeah, you kind of live into it, or you're the introvert or whatever. And these labels do just stick with us and become part of our identity. And how now I know you love to throw parties. So how do you think you've shed that identity as the quiet, shy one to the one who now loves to throw parties and festivals and create community?
That I can thank a lot for the time with Anat and training camp for the soul. Because the way she does it now is an online program, like a 90-day online program. I am not sure if I'm going to guess if I had done the program that way, for me, I wouldn't have leapt into it the way that I did, going into a cabin in the mountains with strangers where we're all just like, we're going to dig into these stories and these beliefs that we've grown up with and spend 5 days digging deep into it. And then you know the people, you get to know them. And then from there we had 90 days of support after that. So I think the in-person part and then having the support of Lance really helped for me to follow through. We dug deep into stories, dug into childhood, like getting down to the root of like the shy child, that story that's there and the limitation that was there because of that story, that idea of that's who I was. But first, some of the things that we did at training camp, we did some breath work. We did some trauma release exercises, and we did digging into like those beliefs, those patterns that we've developed. And between all of those things, I had one point in time where my body just started releasing, like, those videos, the video that Mark likes to show of the polar bear shaking, which I'll try to remember to to put in the show notes. But that's basically my body was just doing that shaking and releasing out 36 years of anxiety that I'd had built up. And I remember I'd done some yoga, I'd done acupuncture beforehand. And I remember going to acupuncture and I'd be asked, like, how are you feeling today? And I'm like, good, but there's a buzzing under my skin. And he'd be like, what do you mean? I'm like, just feels like there's bees buzzing underneath my skin. Like their wings are just under my skin. And so I remember having like noticing on some days when I'd go to acupuncture, noticing that and talking about it. After my body went through like that full release, and I was finally done shaking things out, I was like, I looked at a knot and I said, my hands are buzzing or tingling. And she looks at me and she's like, yeah, that's normal. This is your first time doing this. And I was like, no, wait, only my hands are buzzing. And I was like, this has been a whole body thing up until this point. So feeling like how my body could feel without that tension and without the buzzing for the first time too, I was just like, oh, this is nice.
It's like a peace.
Yeah. And so being able to release that and finally getting to notice, like, my body can feel something other than this. Like I can notice if I'm starting to feel anxious or nervous or different things, like, okay, my body's building up. There's some tension here. I can allow it instead of trying to fight it and push it down. And then Anat also had these affirmations that she gave to us to play, and I would play them every morning getting ready. And so I was just like, I've made this change. I don't want to go back. Like I am going to do everything I can to cement it in. So I spent time just getting these things in and rewriting the stories and the beliefs from I can't talk to people or I'm shy or whatever to telling myself that I am the life of the party and I create connections and I welcome people in. I'm open, I'm vulnerable, like telling myself that these are all good things, good qualities, to be open and to welcome people in. And it was day after day of reminding myself and cementing that in, and then allowing myself to look and see where that's actually true too. Like, oh, I've made these friendships. These people want to talk to me. These people are enjoying my company. These people, like, so allowing myself to see those things instead of telling myself, no, they don't want to hang out with me. All the different stories that I had before. So, yeah, it's been a few years of noticing too. Like when we've thrown a festival, I remember saying to myself, who do you think you are to be doing this? Like, why do you think that you should be doing this or could be doing this and that people are going to show up? And then because we'd had time of working on those stories and building our corner person, I was like, hi, I'm Kristin Joy Davis. Nice to meet you. So it's like I had was able to build that person to go beside the Billy voice, and that's there also. I mean, like, hey, you can do these things. So yeah, just it's been a lot of practice.
And how? So you left your job in education during the pandemic. Tell us about that and like why you decided to leave. How you came about that decision.
Yeah, that it's funny because I've been thinking about this one a lot lately.
In terms of like, oh God, why did I do that? Or like,
no, I'm not. I don't plan to go back there. Although I'm sure I could. At one point in time, they were offering bonuses to come back. I was like, that's not enough of a bonus anyway. It was like $250. So yeah, it's been a little more clear to me about the lead up to it, because before I think I was along the lines of, or I would have said I did it partially because I knew this job, it wasn't for me, but really there's even more to it. And it's simpler. I was burning out hard and fast. I had worked the job for 6 years, and for some of those years I was fighting to get time off. I had to, almost every time I'd ask for time off, I was getting denied because somebody else was already off or different things. And then we only got like 7 days off a year. We're working overtime, and I would go into work in the morning not knowing necessarily when I'd get off from work. And so that in itself was a form of like a trauma of being like, I'm in fight or flight the whole time. And on top of that, I wore so many hats. I was a bus driver. I was team lead. I was a classroom teacher. And I didn't feel like I could do any of those jobs fully, except for the bus driver, because I got pulled out of the classroom to go do it.
I mean, like, I hope you fully did your bus driver job. Yes. Just leaving kids on the side of the road.
Exactly. You know.
Not today, kid.
Nope. not after yesterday.
Take a cab.
So yeah, it was a hard burnout. And I remember, like, even before I was able to fully, like, I'd release that anxiety in my body, I remember there was a time where my heart was physically hurting, not in the metaphorical sense, but it was a physical, like, chest, heart's hurting. And I had this very clear thought in my head of, if you keep going like this, it's going to be you or the job. And after that point in time, I remember having moments where I almost wished I got in a car accident or something happened with my health, because then I don't have to go to work. And like, how does this make sense that, like, you're wishing for physical illness or harm so that you have an excuse not to show up to work?
I've been there.
So yeah, I mean, all those thoughts were going on in my head. And when it came down to like, after I started to manage the stress in my body and was able to calm my thoughts and myself more easily, I knew I wanted to be done with the job. I also knew that quitting as soon as I was done with training camp for the soul was a bad idea because I'm like, this is income. And my class went in school year times. So it's like, I'm going to do one more year and I'm going to make this my best year. Like I can be my best for the kids. I can teach them everything that I've been learning and I'll make this my best year. And then a couple of things happened. Like first, my boss got fired in January. So I'm in management. I was third in command, got bumped up to second in command. So this is January 2020. Then March 2020, all the kids in my class, their parents decided to keep them home. So I don't have a class anymore to teach. I also am now fully in management because I don't have a class and there's only two of us. So a lot of things happened where we basically went down to a skeleton crew because we could only have so many kids in the building. And a whole bunch of my coworkers aren't working. And so I'm looking like I knew I wanted to be done. I had a specific date. I was going to end the school year. Kids were going to graduate, do one more week, then I'm done. And then I see this happen. I'm like, is this the time to quit? And I still knew I wanted to, but it was like, is it a good time to? Like, I am so solid in this position that they won't fire me. Like I was showing up. I was doing a good job. I was helping run things to my own detriment as well. But I had like solidified myself so much into my position that my boss that had gotten fired in January, before then, she would tell me often that she doesn't know, like I was such a instrumental part of the team that she didn't know how to run the center without me. And I was like, how did I get myself here? How did I get myself to that position where people are telling me they cannot run the center if I'm not there? So yeah, it was actually a really tough decision to write my letter of resignation. I put it off. I gave more than 2 months notice because the company was pretty slow at filling positions. So it's like 2 months should be more than enough time to fill my position. And then, yeah, it took me about 10 days. I gave myself 10 days to hand it in because I knew it was going to be rough. And almost every day I went to go hand it in to show it to my boss. I hear about somebody threatening to quit, or another person is like, I'm going to quit, or all these things. And I was like, it's another person. And I finally, like, I talked to my boss and she was very, very kind about it. She's like, good, I'm glad you're doing this for you. And I've been expecting this because she and I used to talk before our original boss got fired.
Yeah.
And so I handed it to her and I was just like, yeah, I had all these, like, I kept hearing people are quitting, people are doing this. And I knew I couldn't continue to let that get in my way. So I'm like, this was one of the hardest decisions. I cried while I wrote this letter and here. So yeah, I had to make the decision for myself because every other job before then, I was moving and I was like, oh, I have to quit this job because I'm moving back to Michigan. Oh, I have to quit this job because I'm moving to Oregon. Or the school year would end because I was substitute teaching. So this was the very first time I had to actually make a decision for myself without there being any logical, like, oh, I'm moving. I kept hoping we would move or do something just so I could be like,
can we move?
Yeah.
Can we just run away? Yeah.
And then we didn't. So
well, that would like ease any feeling of like guilt, right? Like, oh, I'm not leaving you because I'm abandoning you. I'm leaving because we're moving. So it's no longer my decision. So thanks.
Yep.
Totally get that.
Yeah. So making the decision for myself was, it was I'll go with it was the hardest decision to make because it was fully because I needed to.
Yeah.
Mm.
Interesting. And so what have you done since leaving that job? How has things changed? What are you doing with yourself? What are you doing with yourself, young lady?
My favorite thing to say is I'm these days when people ask me that is I'm figuring out what I want to do when I grow up. Yeah. So some days I'm questioning myself and if I should start working for somebody else again. And so I am now I'm building Language Ninjas, and that's a one day at a time, day after day, just continuing to show up and trust myself and believe. But so Language Ninjas is the brand, and it's I've been building tools with the help of Rachel Badel, who did graphic design and illustration for me. But building tools for parents and kids and educators to use to learn how our words are affecting us. But mostly, like, I finally gotten to the heart of what Language Ninjas is. It's the mind and body connection to the words. So like all of them go together. Your emotions are tied to your words, and those emotions are tied to your body because we feel those things in our body. So if you're using words like don't go up the slide, you're going to feel that in your body, and your emotions are going to you're going to have certain emotions like maybe anger, frustration. If you say go down the slide, up the stairs, there's a different emotion there. Feel it differently in your body. And so with Language Ninjas, it's connecting how all of those things come together. And really it all comes down to how we're breathing as well. Like if you're frustrated, stressed out, your breathing is going to be different than if you're relaxed, having fun, having a good time. So yeah, it's the tying everything together to realize that our emotions are connected to how we feel in our body, like those physical sensations. Our breath, it also helps control how we feel in our body. And then we can change, we can control, we can have more control over how we feel if we're aware of the words that we're using instead of going off of that programming of whatever comes to your mind first. But if you can take a second and breathe and allow, instead of the emotions to run the show, but allow like yourself to pause and see what's going on, it can affect, it can change how you feel, and it can change how you're viewing the world too. Because I for sure was a doom and gloom person for parts of my life. And so I'd say it's a lot better on the side where I can take a breath and help with my stress levels versus feeling like I'm always tight in my chest and I've got to go and do. And if I'm not doing these things, that's bad.
So tell us about your books.
Well, I keep forgetting there's a WINS journal in there too. 3 books in under a year. I'm proud of me.
That's
and
awesome.
An emotions toolkit. So maybe that's technically 4 books, even though one's a digital thing. So the Abracadabra and Know What to Do and My Words Are My Wand, the children's books, those are both, there's My Words Are My Wand.
Yes, it finally arrived.
Yay.
My copy. And there's behind us there in a frame after I read it, Abracadabra, I Know What to Do. So I got to get a frame for this one.
Yay. Those books both talk about our words and how our words, we can change them and we can change how we feel. So in the first book, it's a more general book of learning about our words. So Olive, she's moving, she's got some life stuff happening, and she's feeling frustrations because everything's changed. Like mom and dad are now busy. She's got to meet new people, and these people don't seem to be the friendliest. And she's got new teachers and new neighborhood. And so she learns about how abracadabra, with my words I create, how she can change her words around from, like, instead of saying, these kids are mean to me, looking around and she's saying, hey, oh, I see a friend, somebody over there. I can be a friend to them. I can choose to go play with somebody and be a friend to others. And so she's learning about how she can take control of her life by switching around her words. So instead of feeling like the victim of the situation, she's taking charge of it. And in my words and my wand, it goes over the same type of idea, but with this one, instead of there being a magical creature right there helping Kai and talking him through it, he learns through a journal that he can take charge with his words. So he's had huge life change where his dad died, and he's dealing with that and all that's happening with his family, and learns how he's been giving his power away while fighting with his friends and arguing and blaming others for what's going on. So in that book, it's looking more at projections with the language type. So the first one was, it introduced all of the things: negations, projections, soft talk. But it focused slightly on soft talk and solid talk, like being vague versus, hey, we're going to go to the park after dinner. So this book is focused solely on blaming others. So the projections, and changing that around to a reflection of how, instead of blaming somebody else for what's going on in your life, how can you take charge and you take responsibility? So instead of mom's always yelling at me or I'm always getting into trouble, realizing like, hey, I can listen to mom, or I can be kind to my brother. I can make these changes, and hey, now I feel better too, because I'm not just fighting and yelling and getting upset. And with both of these, the idea is it's a practice. Like, you're going to have times where it's easy to do it. There's going to be times where you forget, and there's other times where you know, but it's going to be hard. And it's a practice. So just getting introduced and learning about how we can change how we feel with our words. That's the idea behind that.
So what made you dive into a topic like death in the second book?
So there's two sides to this. So initially I'd been looking at thinking about chapter books, which I still would love to do, some like maybe graphic novel type thing where when they're ninjas, and have villain type people that they fight with that are like projections or negations. But they have a cooler name than that. So initially, the mom and dad in that chapter, it was, or in that book, the chapter book, it was going to be that Kai is like the main villain is the guy throwing blame. So everything's terrible. So while they're fighting him, the line that goes through with his life, it was that his parents were splitting and divorcing, separating, whatever point they were going to be at in the book, but they were arguing a lot. And so initially that's where I was going to go with it, like keep that. So on the one hand, it was too much for a picture book, to have that storyline, adding in of mom and dad fighting plus everything else I had planned. So in a way, it was easier just to have one parent. But besides the ease of it being like, I still wanted it to like the idea of there was a hardship going on. There was a challenge going on.
Mhm.
I wanted to make the point that like Olive moved and her life had a change, but overall, it's a minor change. It's big for a kid, but it's a minor change. Her family unit's all together. I wanted to also make the point that like you can be going through a really crappy time and still choose like, do I want to be the victim or do I want to take my power and take charge of my life? So that was a part of it too, where it's like this is a low spot. Like it's hard dealing with death, and especially if it's somebody that's a caregiver, that's part of your safety net. So yeah, I wanted to make a point within the story, like partially these kids are all becoming the language ninjas as well. So I realized to me, they're kids. Like they are little human beings and this is their backstory. So because part of me was wondering, like, is this too much? Should I go into too much detail? And I was like, no, because these are the kids. Like this is how they become the language ninjas. And I wanted to make the point of you can be going through lows and really low lows, and you can still choose not to be the victim. You can still choose to take
like how you respond. Yeah. That's very cool. And so with the language ninjas and the work that you're doing in your books, what is your social rebellion?
My social rebellion with the books and with language ninjas is to give tools to give tools to people so that they can take charge of their life. I have worked at one point in time. I was focused on like, I want to bring this to teachers because I've worked with so many teachers. And one thing I've noticed in all of my years of teaching, like through substitute teaching, through student teaching, tutoring, and I've noticed there are quite a lot of teachers that are the victim to the circumstances. I was when I didn't know when I would go home from work. Like I'm the victim here. Like I'm coming into work and I don't know when I'm going to go home. And working with teachers was a big bite of a pie. And parents, they have kids that they want to work with, that because they're living with them, they're going through the day-to-day of like, how do I manage this? So I've started to focus toward parents specifically, but giving them some tools to ease the parenting trip or journey. So that's the smaller rebellion. And in the grander scheme of all of this, like I'd love language ninjas to find its way into schools. Because what education is really what it's become, especially here in the US, is training kids to be part of the workforce. So you go to school during your parents' workday. You need to fit inside this box. Even though we're told we learn so many different ways, like you could be an audio learner, a visual learner, a tactile learner. They mainly teach auditory learning and rote memorization. And it's a lot of teaching to a standardized test these days. So it's focusing on your reading and your math to pass a test so that your school can get funding. And the curiosity is gone. The play is gone. And so what I really dreamed of at the beginning of Language Ninjas was my own school where kids don't have to sit all day. They can move around, where there's a playground in the gym area instead of like you go in and you kick around a ball. Where you're combining together movement and play and learning all in one. So it's a holistic style of learning. Yeah. When we read the book, Be More Pirate, my initial, what I want to do is take down the Department of Education.
Yeah.
Let's watch it burn. and yeah, where that focus is toward is getting these tools, getting like the emotions toolkit and reframing negative thoughts to a more positive thought. What I'd like is to start seeing those used in homeschooling or with teachers that are able to work outside of the curriculum that is state mandated, and slowly start getting in there and spreading the word that you can feel better. You can take charge. You can be the hero of your own story.
And so with that, what good trouble are you creating?
Well, getting the books out there. And I mean, this podcast obviously is good trouble. Clearly. And yeah, just making connections, with talking with people and spreading the word. The more people I talk to, as far as Language Ninjas is concerned, I'm meeting more and more people that have the similar mindset of like, yes, learning should be play. Learning should be fun. We want curious little humans, so that we can have a world where they're doing what they want instead of doing those desk jobs that they're going by. Do pensions even exist anymore? Like that was the thing. I go to my desk job to get my pension. Do those exist?
For some people.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I know my mom is retiring next year.
Uh-huh.
And like she's got my mom's got a government job, so applying for her pension that's gonna kick in next year, and that it's interesting because I'm very excited for her. And I'm like, fuck, I don't have a pension. Like, what? Am I never gonna retire? How do I retire? So yeah, I don't know about like the rest of the world. I think the boomers still have theirs, but
yeah,
I don't know about everybody else.
Yeah, because teachers used to. I remember in middle school, one of my teachers had been in the school for years, and he could easily retire off of his teaching salary. Like he was sticking around because he was tenured in, and he wasn't at retirement age yet, but he's like, he's got more than enough money. And now you talk to a teacher, and they're like, I barely making ends meet, and I'm working loads and loads of hours beyond school hours.
It's really interesting how like teachers, nurses, all of these professions that are so like vital are being treated like shit, and people are leaving in droves because they're overworked, overstressed, underpaid, underappreciated. And like, not to start on like a feminist rant, but they're also traditionally female jobs, right? And so I'm interested I'm not interested. I don't want to see what happens when all of our caregivers, whether they be teachers or nurses, just kind of fuck off and say you're all on your own. Like education collapses, healthcare collapses, like we need to treat our caregivers better. Anyways, a little rant.
I know. And I'm trying to figure out now, like that's within the last 20 to 30 years that shift happened too.
Yeah. Teaching used to be a good job. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So yeah, good trouble.
Good trouble.
Throwing parties is a good trouble too.
So what advice would you give our listeners who want to start their own pirate journey?
I would say the main thing, I mean, we've learned so much from so many people,
I know,
but
right?
like the main thing is to get solid on what you want. Figuring it out, and being willing to take a leap of faith in yourself, because sometimes we aren't always going to have it figured out what that next step is. Sometimes you're taking a step into the dark. I don't know what's going to happen. If you are wanting to get that pirate journey going, that step into the dark is going to be scary, but necessary. Because if you continue to stay in what you know and the safety and the security, you're going to keep on that path. You most likely can look straight ahead and be like, this road is what I'm going to be on from now until, as long as I keep to the safety. But you want to be on that pirate journey, there's going to be rough seas. There's going to be those scary moments. So being willing to step into them. And I will say, like, we've talked a lot about following your heart. Sometimes your heart is going to lead you in a direction where you're like, oh, I'm now broke. They have to get back on that path and be like, I'm going to go work for somebody else. So taking those leaps, and also knowing that there are times where your heart might lead you to like, oh, this was not exactly where I wanted to end up. So being willing to do what needs to get yourself back on track too, like to remember how it feels to follow your heart. But like the brain and heart comics, the Awkward Yeti ones, like heart can lead you too far sometimes.
Well, and we had that conversation with Laurel Erica. Right? Like, yes, sometimes you have to do other things to make money.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily that you're giving up on your dreams or anything like that. I mean, last year, this time, I started working for a safety company, like part-time, as well as coaching. And, I mean, the lady that owned the company was great. Everyone I worked with was great. It like was soul crushing to do that. And last week I gave all of my stuff back to her because I don't have to do it anymore. Right. So there's a difference between following your heart and following your passions and doing what you got to do sometimes to make some cash.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to do what you got to do sometimes to make some cash.
Because there are options.
Options.
Yeah. And maybe
you can sell pictures of your feet online. I don't know.
This is true. Like, and you can get an OnlyFans and just take pictures of your feet. Not even something you could get in trouble for.
Right? Like, hey, if someone likes feet that much, who am I to say that they're wrong?
Exactly.
Awesome.
Go to the beach, take some pictures.
Very cool. Is there any, I do know something I missed. Tell us a little bit about Purposeful Parent Podcast. That's hard to say. Yeah. It's a lot of alliteration.
I know.
Purposeful Parent Podcast.
And then we have Pirate Living Podcast.
Pirate Living Podcast and the Purposeful Parent, Purple Parent. Oh, just go. Tell us about it.
Try writing intros where you're like, and now today on Pirate Parenting Podcast, Parenting Living Podcast,
the Purposeful Pirate Parent.
There we go. So yeah, the Purposeful Parent Podcast. It's funny. When we first, so I'm doing it with Melissa Curtis, who we talked with her, and Chad Curtis back, I don't know, around the 50s, 60s for episodes. And so they had started Inner Architect, where they were working with parents. I'm going to give you a brief background because I kept getting from people like, hey, do you have parenting workshops that you do? And I was like, I used to, I don't. And I had gotten to a place where I had been asked enough that I was like, all right, I'm going to ask some people about workshops, like their parents, what kind of hours of the day would be good for this, all these questions. So I get talk with Melissa. And I had, because Melissa and Chad were doing inner architect and working with parents, I'd also been like, can I just like push everybody to Melissa and Chad, and I'll make the products. They can do the coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So I started talking with Melissa, and she's like, hey, do you want to collaborate? Like, we're sharing each other's stuff all the time anyway. And so I was like, all right, let's do this. So the idea was we wanted to do a parenting program, but also in order to talk with people too and let them know some of the thoughts that are on our minds, and to interview other people that are parents or work with parents or kids. We started the Purposeful Parent podcast, which sometimes I'm in my head, like, I'm not a parent. Do I belong in this conversation? And these are like important conversations of partially to talk about things that parents are going through, like people that have done, started getting those stories out of their way and started. A lot of them are entrepreneurs because funny enough, when you start following your heart, you usually start going toward entrepreneurship too. But yeah, we talk with parents about how they're parenting intentionally, and that can look different. And now we're starting to focus on specific topics too. Like we asked Erin Giannetti to talk to us about gun safety and weapon safety. We talked with another person about he volunteers at a camp called Comfort Zone Camp, which is specifically for kids who have had somebody close to them die. So, we're doing some specific things as well, but having conversations to give tips and tools to parents to help them. And also just giving them that permission to be themselves and forgive themselves for those mistakes because they're going to happen. And yeah, just having those conversations where at first I wanted it to be more like some other podcasts that I'd heard with people that work with parents, and they're like, we keep it to like happy, lighter things and the power of our words and mindset and all of this. And then Melissa and I were talking about having specific conversations, like maybe about psychedelics, or like when we're talking with Erin about gun safety. So yeah, I was like, well, because I was trying to avoid cussing or using stronger language, just because I was like, well, then they can listen to them around their kids. And I was like, oh, you know what? Screw that. Like if we're talking about these deeper topics, but it's not us to do that. Like,
it's a parent podcast, not a kids podcast.
Right. And if parents have an issue with it, then they're not the parents that we need. So totally. Yeah. So yeah, it's parent podcast, but also for people that have kids in their lives that want more tools for how to navigate life with kids.
Cool. And where, other than the Pirate Living Instagram, where can our listeners go and find out more about you and buy your book and to all of the cool things?
So the easiest place to find the books is Amazon, because I publish them all through there, and you can find them other places too. Like I found them on Barnes and Noble and online. So there's this website as well called bookshop.org. Yeah, bookshop.org. That if you go onto it and you put in a local bookstore, you can find the books to buy online through a local bookstore. So that's pretty cool too for supporting local. So anyway, you can get those there, or I have them on my website where I sign them and ship them out at kristinjoycoaching.com. And then got Language Ninjas is the Instagram. And we've got There's a list. I also have a Language Ninjas YouTube where there's a few little guided meditations on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I read my book, Abracadabra, I Know What to Do, out loud on there. So that's Language Ninjas on YouTube. Did I say Language Ninjas on Instagram? Yes. Yeah. And then www.languageninjas.me is the website for Language Ninjas. Yeah, you can buy, I mean, just like with Pirate Living, we have stores where it's either on my website or TeePublic, where you can go buy designs of pirate designs or ninja designs. There's too many things. The list goes on and on.
There's so many things, which is awesome. Well, this has been great chatting with you.
As if we don't every week.
As if we don't all the time. But just having that space to, share our own stories, because we don't do that. We like to highlight other people, and it's important to highlight ourselves and the work that we're doing as well.
It's true. So stay tuned, because Quran's it's going to be coming up too.
Yeah.
we haven't done it yet, but it's coming
one day. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this.
Thank you. I don't know how to get out of here.